This is the second oral history interview with Dante Anzolini. It's November 2nd, 2005. I'm Forrest Larson in the Lewis Music Library. It is my pleasure to welcome back Dante Anzolini, Associate Professor of Music at MIT, conductor of the MIT Symphony and Chamber Orchestras. It's November 2nd, 2005. Thanks again for coming back.
No, thank you.
In the last interview, you mentioned that there had been a conflict at the Conservatory in La Plata that almost made you give up music. Do you care to say anything about this? There was something that you kind of alluded to. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing that, but
No.
Yeah.
No. Okay, no, there was this situation, 1974-75. It was probably all linked to the political upheaval and problems, turmoil that was taking place in those years.
That was during the years of the Dirty War.
It was the beginning of the Dirty War, and there were many changes in the government and many changes in the management of the conservatory. One of them, I remember the placement of some priest and organist, director of the conservatory in those years, and he was a very good friend of people that work in the extreme right, and it was kind of like a fascist part of the internal fight in the regime. In any event, that had something to do with the case. Another precious part of the information is the fact that already, at 11, 12 years old, 13, I started to develop certain interests on particular kinds of music and particular ways of playing. Those refer to the more the avant-garde, then was considered in the avant-garde, and my refusal to become one of one more of those pianists that would play under the standard guidelines, and also the factors that I was getting to be known in the conservatory as a young, bright kid who could sight read a lot. Anything that were I think I told you the stories. And at the same time, because of this change of management, my main teacher in piano had to leave the conservatory. She was...
Who was that teacher again?
Carmen Scalcione, formerly Carmen Amicarelli. Amicarelli, Francisco, was the son of an Italian musician who became one of the foremost piano teachers in those decades. This woman was married to him, and she was a phenomenal pianist herself. She was also the director of the conservatory. So she left the two positions, the professorship and also the directorship. So someone else came in, and there was some kind of like funny situation among faculty members who stayed and faculty members who left. In the middle of those battles, usually the losers are the students. And there was probably the first time in my life that I suffered a big stroke. And the stroke was that I went to an exam almost without preparation by no teacher. It was I was going from one to the other. Myself, I was in my adolescent years. I don't think that I played very well in that exam, but I failed the exam for the first and last time in my life. I failed a piano exam, which was unthinkable. Well, the truth is, I failed the exam also because there were 3 teachers in the jury, and the 3 teachers were the real enemies of my former teachers, so I was punished because of her. Also, the one other factor was important, and I historically remember even today, because as funny as it sounds, those 3 professors play a lot less than me at that age. I mean, in equal circumstances, I was able to play Chopin or Liszt as they would never in any dream would play. So it was another situation that even today I remember, 30 years after, that prepared me for many of the injustices that I happen to suffer like anyone else. I mean, I don't want to make a point of, many people suffer that all the time. But the funniest part of the story, or probably the more tragic comic, it's a little bit tragic because I failed that exam. They say that I had this equivalent to F in their numbers. I was looking at the situation with awe. I was a lot younger. Obviously I was 14, 15 that year, I think. And I couldn't believe that these people whom I knew were able to say, even though I knew that they were professors, but everyone knew that I played much better than any of them, that they could say that I would fail even if I didn't play so well, but it wasn't for an F. It was evidently something behind. So then that summer I decided to quit music. I thought that, if I'm failing piano exam, and then already 14, I knew that I had a lot of weird muscular skills. I mean, I think that, I hope it doesn't sound arrogant, but I really do have a very big talent for piano playing in terms of the muscular preparedness, or something that amounts to I was able to read anything and play anything at any given point, and the truth was that I was being called for playing, every afternoon, every day, different piano, violin, bassoon, violin, viola. I mean, I was the only guy who did a lot of chamber music in the conservatory. We were not so many, but we were 300 people, and I was not. And I thought, if they fail me, I mean, if I can, they can go to hell. I mean, I saw the political thing behind. My mother, in one gesture that I still recognize as very important, went to protest bitterly to the director. The director was then that priest. And the guy said, even though I had a very good behavior, I had my personality when I was young too. And the people said, the guy said to my mother that perhaps the problem was my personality. I was very calm, but people knew that when I had an idea, I was stubborn.
Yeah.
But that was an excuse. The problem was that people really hated my former teacher, and then I said, to the hell with them. I will play soccer the whole summer. Won't prepare any shit. I had the second chance to pass the exam in March, so I prepared 1 week, only 1 week. With that knowledge of 1 week, 5 or 6 days of practice, I went there and I got a high A. Passing the exam, and I came back to music. Thanks to my mother, most probably. She pushed for that, and she knew that I had some ideas and some. At that point, I wasn't really into music in terms of, I was too young. I wasn't thinking of a career, but funny enough, after I passed that exam, I played my first piano recital as a composer and pianist, only months after. So that was one big kick.
Wow. In the previous interview, you mentioned kind of a personal crisis as you had gone off to the university to study mathematics. You had been kind of pushed in that direction because that was a so-called real profession. But it seems like also at the same time you might have been experiencing what many young people do, a existential crisis. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Henry Miller, Bertrand Russell, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about some of that a little bit?
Those personal crises had probably to do, in my particular case, with an opposition that I was never able to deal with, and probably even now is affecting me it comes, analyzing in therapy and things, perhaps, the opposite figures in my parents. I always related my father to something, my mother to something else, and perhaps the dark sides of my personality, extremes of rationality and non-rationality. I mean, feeling and rationality, against each other. Also, the discovery of many musics and my interest in composing started. So that moved the whole. I mean, I was already composing when I was 11, but I finally decided to go in composition when I was that age. When I failed that exam, then I passed it again, and then the discovery of some writers and some composers, plus my leaving definitely the Catholic Church, because I was a guy who went to church every single Sunday of my, when I was in my age, between 7 and 15, every single Sunday, and did all the sacraments, and I believed. And there were many things that woke me up. At least it gave me other ideas. When I think I mentioned that in the other interview. I'm not sure, but when a priest at my school showed me the machine guns that they were using.
You didn't mention this.
I didn't mention that. In my high school, there was a music teacher. I was especially considered important in that in my class because I was the only musician. At age 15, I was able to play most of the big romantic repertoire on the piano. It's like, so my peers didn't know anything about music. So the guy who took always a special affection on me, and one day he took me to. This was a Catholic school, and he took me to his parochial in the church. He showed a little group of us, 4 or 5, the gun machines. Because he was a part of the same kind of gang, the extreme right, fighting against the communists, supposed to be. The communists, it was worse than the McCarthy period here in this country, because you would get killed. And that was another problem, my father being very smart in those things, because he had to go through the past, through the Second World War, the fascists, and he was the one that, being adolescent, took care of my grandmother. He made me promise not to speak about my ideas, since my ideas were not precisely rightish. And those years also, my father, he was a truck driver. Besides the fact that he had a high culture in opera or music, it really didn't have a high education, not even high school. He was working as a truck driver, and he was working for one of the police departments. He himself one of those days, the whole thing is boiling together in my memories, because I know that many things happen at the same time. My father came one day came back to our place, came back home, and he was pallid, he was white, he was completely nervous. He had seen in the place where he was bringing some construction materials with his truck, enormous hole with a lot of dead bodies. It's very similar to what you would see now in the Second World War. The things that they do with Jewish people. That happened in Argentina, and it was a huge thing, when you were kind of like, adolescent, going to your young years and seeing all these disasters happening. With the potentially, it's just like feeding conflicts. Internal conflicts that by definition are part of our background. Everyone says when you are 15, 14, 16. So this all boiled together, my discovery of some music, as I said, the political turmoil, my willingness to maybe quit the opposition of my realities of rational versus non-rational, by sheer chance, the fact that they discovered big mathematical talent when I was 15, 16, I was given calculus classes, and our we had a very good mathematician as a professor in that high school. Was a very good level, and he advised me to keep going math. And I like math, but I wanted to do some doctorate. I like pure math. I mean, not the application to technology or anything. It's just that I like those worlds of ideas. So I pursued that, not being completely sure that I would do anything. Then I was trying to, I'm always facing the opposite. I was trying to be practical, and since the entering that university application process was difficult, and I had to pass an exam, and I passed the exam very well. I mean, really with high notes, But then I thought, with music I will never have a job. With math, doing that, I will never have a job. So it's better that I study some. Computing was then in the beginnings, 1976. In Argentina, we had a computer that was as big as this library. One computer, and we were punching cards.
Oh yes, I remember those. Yeah.
Remember those times. So so at that point, I entered in the university. Since I was 1 year younger than everyone, I look a lot younger even, and I already started playing piano in concerts, and then I studied with the viola, and composition wasn't. I was doing 1 zillion things, way too many, and then all of a sudden they invited me to teach at the high school, me being even younger than the last year high school students. So I did all those things. I started in a tango orchestra, and at certain point it was a collapse. I mean, I couldn't handle anything anymore. It was too much. But by age 17, I was doing math in the university, piano in the conservatory, viola in the conservatory, composition, surviving playing viola already in the conservatory's orchestra, doing a lot of chamber music, smoking a lot, normal cigarettes. I didn't know anything about marijuana until I was a lot older. But I had to quit soccer because I didn't have any time. In the meantime, at age 15, I almost became a pro, and my teacher said either piano or soccer. You cannot do both, and I chose for piano. I think that I regretted my whole life, and I still play soccer, and I used to have some very good skills, and now I'm there. And all these things together made me rethink music composition life. Those years I discovered Bartók, Schoenberg, Ives, and I had a teacher who, his name was Enrique Gerardi, gave us a lot of elements, but for instance, the freedom and the craziness, the beautiful craziness of Ives, we didn't have much information about him. I mean, it was for me a fable. It was a big history to get his piano sonata, which I bought when I was 18, 19. Didn't get anything. I mean, I tried to read it, and I did somehow. I still have the same score here in Boston, the same one that I bought. I didn't have any access to the fourth. I heard the fourth symphony and almost cried. I couldn't believe that. I mean, it was a revelation. But then the truth is that not having any access to this kind of side of things, I pursued the second Viennese school kind of road. And that eventually got me in a position that some years after people told me, I mean, some of my composer friends, even here in the faculty, Evan Ziporin told me something about, I mean, it would, you said like you're trying to cut your head and smile at the same time. Impossible. Then there was these magic numbers in the other side of my brain, and my need for rationality, and my despise for everything that remotely approached sentiments or feelings. Therefore, it was a clear schizophrenic choice in which I tried to do the safe part, and I also eventually got me to the wrong spot. I remember that my last piece, written when I was 20, was a viola sonata, because I played the viola and played the piano, and it was, I showed it to this big teacher, Gandini, Gerardo Gandini, and he was smiling and grinning and saying, wow, it's a big second Venice school in Berisso, in my hometown, and you are the guy. And I see the score now, and I think that it's a pretty good example of Bergian, post-Bergian, I would say, nothing bad, I don't think. I mean, but then I went to the limits of that mentality, and I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know. The language problem was impossible for me to solve then. I mean, had I lived in this country, for instance, where you had so many in a big umbrella of 1 zillion different things that you can have access to, maybe I would have seen the many possible answers in all directions.
So Gandini didn't kind of show you other options?
No, he doesn't have them even today. I mean, today he is in that aesthetics.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard
he was very involved in avant-garde music in Argentina. There was a group that he organized, I've written down here, what's it called? Let's see here. Grupo de Experimentación Musical.
Yeah, that one. Well, he formed it then.
Yeah, and I would have assumed that he would have had a kind of a sense of the larger, contemporary musical world.
Honestly, maybe he did or he tried, but I didn't. There were two aspects to it. One is that he quit the conservatory and he went back to Buenos Aires. I was in this smaller city. I couldn't take private lessons. I didn't have the money. And then a friend convinced me, Osvaldo Gorijov. Mm-hmm. Osvaldo convinced me to go back to composition and take some lessons. And I went with my sonata, my viola sonata.
Right.
Because then when I was young, I mean, Osvaldo and I were part of the group of young composers and the most known, But I quit, then I said, basta, and I wanna do is I wanna be a conductor. And he didn't quit. He kept composing, and eventually became who he is now. I mean, in fact, I remember a concert in the theater where I'm the music director now. It's funny, I went as a kid. I mean, when I wasn't a kid, I was 16, and Peter Maxwell Davies was there because Gandini invited him, and there was a concert.
Wow.
So there were big people coming, and somehow we were in touch. But I don't want to held responsible anyone for my failures. I mean, it was me. It was essentially me that I couldn't handle my own needs. I tried to be practical again to the rational side, and I tried to be. Then I said, okay, I play such and such. I don't want to be a pianist. I always loved the orchestra sound. Always. One of, as I said to you I think in the other interview, used to hear the radio, and one of the first, Mena Mountains, I heard it in the radio, and obviously the biggest important buy of the year was my radio with a CD then we didn't have, with a cassette recorder. Right. So I still have some cassettes from then in my office here of Mena Mountains, the first stupid time that is
That's the Ruggles Mena Mountains.
Yeah. So that kind of music, where was the access? By the radio, maybe sometime. Low social class family, you're not gonna be able to buy records, and they didn't even have them. Yeah, I couldn't solve the difficulty. Then I quit composition. I kept doing math. Then I quit math too. I said, basta, I cannot handle that because it's boring. I like it, but it's boring. So that was.
So we'll pursue some questions later on related to the legacy of Arnold Schoenberg, but I want to change the subject radically here. You say that opera is in your blood. Are you meaning particularly Italian opera when you think of that?
Yeah.
Tell me about your childhood exposure to opera and your parents' interest in it.
I think I told you the story of my father being, who he was, one of the 10 children and the only one who didn't pursue music.
Right.
He always asked me he asked me when I was small, to play this Traviata. I had to find a nice, simple version. I studied that, and it was one of his loves. We lived in the same house. I think I mentioned that too. 2 families, my uncle's family and my father's family. We were 6 people in a smaller place. I mean, this was the whole. A little bigger was the room for my family, and a little bigger for their family in one, and so there was a piano on the other one because my uncle had only one daughter and she was a pianist. The first sound that I heard in a piano was that one, and the tradition of my grandfather being their father, my uncle, my dad's, being the musician. So that came through. And my uncle had a phenomenal tenor voice. As much as I hated the guy because there were big problems in my family, in that, partnership.
And your uncle's name was?
Mario. He still
Did he immigrate to Argentina after your father?
No, first. My father went there as an Argentina. That's a funny thing. As a tourist.
Yeah, you told me about that.
And he stayed there.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to be. I mean, anyway,
right.
It was weird. No, my uncle did that right after the World War. This uncle was the chief of the tanks in the Italian side of Rommel thing in Egypt. So that was my uncle. So he, after leaving the tanks, he went back to Friuli, and then he emigrated to Argentina. That guy has a big tenor voice, and in those days, in the 60s and 70s, all the immigrants from Italy would gather every other week to have big mangiate, big gatherings, for eating, and obviously it was always known that anyone with voice would sing a cappella, no accompaniment, if we didn't have any piano. Songs, Neapolitan songs, Northern songs, and especially all Puccini and Verdi. That was part of the informal training in that Italian neighborhood. I have to confess then that I had a big ambiguity about opera, because sometimes I hated it deeply and sometimes I loved it. I went to my first opera performance not to listen but to sing.
That was the Magic Flute that you
The
sang?
Magic Flute.
Yeah.
I didn't know any opera at all. I didn't go to the theater, but the first time that I went to sing. And it was imprinted in my genetic code. So to some extent it's part of my training. Now, many times I refused to go to opera houses or concert halls. I didn't feel like, and I said I won't go until I conduct there. And I did it in many places. And then I ended up conducting those places, in Europe, for instance.
So what was the first professional opera performance that you actually went as an audience member, that you actually saw?
I remember it was Traviata.
Uh-huh. And where was that?
It was in Argentina.
Yeah.
Then then I went back and forth because I was, for instance, when I was 15 in those turmoil years, I was also, since everyone knew that I was a phenomenal sight reader, all singers contacted me to accompany, and I started accompanying professional singers. And I had read in the famous Scherchen book that was one of the schools that you have to go through, in order to learn the right tempi for your. And it was funny because without doing opera, I was in all the singers' world all of a sudden. Then, another clash. After 20, I was hired in the theater as accompanist to the choir,
Right.
and became assistant conductor, and I started learning things there, the things that I heard when I was a child. So it's a mixed, because then also those those crazy statements by Boulez, remember?
Yeah, about bombing the opera houses and
Being in that area of the thinking post Bevern,
right.
I had my ambiguity between what I had in my blood, what I had as a child, what I sort of liked in my mathematical world of going through Bevern and Boulez. So then for some years, when I was so involved with the serialism, didn't want to hear opera. Didn't feel. Then the big discovery. Then I learned about Wozzeck, and then I bought this, and I heard that I went bananas. Couldn't believe that was possible.
And you've had a chance to conduct that, right?
I did a semi-thesis, and I big work at Yale, and at Yale I conducted many rehearsals when we were preparing.
Uh-huh.
I didn't conduct the full opera.
I see.
No, not yet. I did a good work of, like 100 pages analysis on the piece.
Of the traditional...
And I now that I remember, I did conduct for my final exam in the masters the 3 pieces.
Oh, of Barry, yeah.
Yeah. I conducted the
Yeah.
Maria, the Interetta, the last scene of the droning. The 3 pieces.
The orchestra pieces, or
Yeah.
I forgot the opus number on that.
You kill me.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was opus 9 everything, no? 9B, 9A.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
Well, the 3 pieces were. You remember the prelude, the one that has the Marie, and the end, the drawing of. Yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
I remember I had a recording.
One last couple more questions about opera. Do you now have some traditional or some favorite traditional operas, things that you really gravitate to from the traditional repertoire?
Oh yeah. Traditional, yes. I mean, I listen to some Bohème, and believe me, I still feel like crying.
Mm-hmm.
Some Traviata moves me deeply. Some, I mean, not the whole piece, but there are some. I mean, I just conducted it again,
Mm-hmm.
But Bohème for me is Carmen. There are some passages of Carmen that I will always remember. I mean, there are some traditional pieces that I love so much, and it's a weird, unreasoned, irrational, completely childish love. More than childish, it's something like passionate.
Yeah, it was a real surprise to me when I found this side to you.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, but it's.
For instance, I mean, there are passages of Gianni Schicchi that integrate both the rational and the non-rational. I mean, in Gianni Schicchi, the comedy, it's a beautiful comedy of Puccini. It's such a smartly planned comedy. It's beautiful. I love that music. I love Carmen. Otello, for me, there are some passages of Otello that the darky, the Iago, the darkest moments of, Othello about to kill, and those moments are for me so significant that I still play the thing, and honestly, they moved me as much as the first movement of the Bartok music for strings, percussion and celesta, or Mahler 4 or Mahler 9, or some of the big chaos of the second movement of Ives, fourth.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of the same crazy excitement that I don't feel that, or some passages of the Roussel Third Symphony, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, the Berio Sinfonia, some passages that I heard, Andriessen also was a discovery only a year ago.
Yeah.
Some incredible moments of Ruggles. Those are parts of, some incredible moments of Bach. I can't deny that. Or the Mozart Requiem.
Yeah.
They move you like crazy, and as completely opposite and different as musical fish, are.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Yeah.
But I have to confess it.
Absolutely.
It's this thing that you see, for instance. That's why with the time I respect more and more Ives, because Ives went to the whole spectrum of anything. You throw a cat on the piano, anything, dissonant, non-dissonant, consonant, non-consonant, chordal, non-chordal, cluster or not. Anything, and you see beauty in every single little thing that he wrote.
Yeah.
And it's as opposite. You go the 114 songs, and you see the entire world there.
Yeah.
So, well, if the taste is eclectic, I admire the guy for that. And I honestly have to confess that in the last act of Bohème, I started crying for the end time that she's going to die, and I cannot help it.
Yeah.
And when this phenomenal second movement of the Roussel third, so incredible dissonant, and the tension going, all these intervals that, and I feel a similar, or the the beautiful fading of the last part of the fourth symphony, Ives' fourth symphony,
Right.
and this dissolving into anything is just something that make your life different. But believe me, Bohème also.
Wow.
It's strange, but it's the truth.
Yeah. I see that you've conducted Strauss's Salome and Der Rosenkavalier. Do you have much interest in German opera? I see you haven't done any Wagner.
No. The Salome, I did many rehearsals, as prepare everything, singers and the orchestra and everything. So I know the piece very well. I have to confess, being 45, that I still have to study Wagner. I conducted one piece by Wagner, the Siegfried Idyll. And although I know very well Tristan, for instance, to give an example, much of the German repertoire is still foreign to me. In the past was because of one of the reasons, the lack of knowledge of the language. Now that I speak the language very well, I could do it, but I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't, I don't feel any special, urge to acquire that knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's something that is, as for instance, there are 2 or 3 points that I consider I have to develop in the next years before I die. One is going back to French language, because I used to speak very well, and now it's my weakest language. And one is Wagner and German romantic and post-romantic music, which is something, aside from Brahms, Schumann, Bruckner, that I'm much more familiar. I conducted 3 symphonies. I have some ideas,
Right.
but opera world, German opera world, believe me, I love Freischütz, for instance. But it's difficult for me to relate to the music. Instead, with Verdi, any piece, even the pieces that I don't know very well, but I relate to them in a second.
Staying on the subject of opera, but moving a little different direction, there's quite a history of opera in Argentina that goes back to the 18th century. It seems like, although it's dominated largely by Italian opera, there's a native Argentine tradition as well. There's some composers' names that I dug up here. Francisco Hargreaves, 1849 to 1900. Zenon Roland, 1856 to 1902. And there's Arturo Berruti, Jan Jose Castro. Are any of these composers' works, are they? Is there any interest in those in Argentina? Do they get performances very often?
No, Berruti definitely not. He was also the composer of the national anthem. Berruti. Beyond that, no one. Castro was a big name, and still the funny thing is I'm somewhat related to that family. One of my important piano teachers was married to Castro's son.
I see. Yeah, he died in 1968. It says
Yeah.
there.
This is Juan Jose Castro.
Yeah.
She was married to Roberto Castro, who is still alive, I think. And she is already. I saw her. She's 70, but looks incredibly well. Castro, Juan Jose Castro. See, the problem is, one of the difficulties to define those interests in that society is that the Argentinian society is such a mixture of cats, dogs, and everything that you can. Generally speaking, people don't care as much as Americans about their American music. To give an example, it's always looking at and for Europe. So most of the repertoire is essentially Italian, with some Wagner. Sometimes they did Wozzeck a couple of times. I mean, you have to remember that the big building of the culture in opera there was due to Toscanini traveling always, because everyone loved that opera house, and Limited Opera House is incredible. Well, they are on a strike and they're closed now. The government decided to close only a week ago.
Oh my!
Just to stop the union's definitions of labor. I mean, there were big things that the unions are defending that I should say they are very fair, and terrible laws defended by the government. So that's a given. The legislation is prehistoric, but at the same time there was one after the other, disaster after the other. They were canceling concerts or opera performances 15 minutes before the time. I mean, even that was imported from Italy. I mean, the big but then, as I said, it was Toscanini, Kleiber, Erich Kleiber was there many years. I mean, after he left the Nazis, the Germany, because he was against the Nazis. And where did he go? He went to the Teatro Colón, and he stayed as a music director for many years. In fact, Carlos Kleiber started studying then because he was with his father. And started there. So there was a big tradition based on the incredible skills of some people who went there to conduct for longer periods of time. I mean, Toscanini, when he went there, he would take a ship, 15 days traveling, and he wouldn't stay for 2 days or 3 like nowadays conductors. No, he would stay for months. So that way, with all the immigrants, they built a quite impressive orchestra and quite a good scale to Europe school of singers. Then all singers came to the Teatro Colón, and there was a big tradition, but believe me, not about creation, because music as a classical art, wasn't taken care of until the appearance of Ginastera, who in fact was the person that founded the conservatory where I studied, for instance.
Right.
To give an
in
example.
La Plata, right.
Yeah. But creation of new operas, the guy himself, Bomarzo, as I was mentioning to you, was cancelled some couple of days before the performance because the government didn't want to deal with those sexually charged scenes and the tonal language. Oh my God, terrible scene.
It even had some problems in the premiere in New York City. I mean, I read some of the
Here.
reviews. Yeah.
Yeah, here too. Unbelievable, because that was in the 60s. Was 60,
Right.
only 68. It wasn't like 1817. No.
Right.
That was 19 in the 60s.
Right.
It was almost parallel. Imagine that. Funny enough, it was, if not the same year, it was almost close to the first performance of Berio's Sinfonia. Imagine that. I mean, how come? I don't really get it.
So, Ginastera also wrote Don Rodrigo, which is an 8-tone or 12-tone work, apparently. I haven't had a chance to look at the score. And then there's another opera of his, Beatrix Cenci.
Cenci, yeah. It's not
Are
that
these operas done very often? No.
They did Bomarzo 2 years ago. Cenci, I don't know. I mean, I'm always talking about the first theater in the country. I'm the music director now of the second one,
Okay, and the first one, the name of that one again?
Teatro Colón.
Yeah,
It's the big,
Right.
name, and for many years.
right.
Those guys, and now there are smaller theaters. One is called Avenida. I just learned in the last 3 or 4 years they have like a private management, and they do some interesting, but it's a small theater. Remember, the Teatro Colón is bigger than the Metropolitan as a whole,
Wow.
but much bigger. So singers always fear going there because you have, in order to have a voice to really, really fill the hall, it's hard as hell. I mean, Pavarotti was booed there. I mean, and people had no patience. I mean, in the past, a generation that's probably now 60 something. Now I'm not sure about the opera culture there, but I saw it. I mean, the critique or public were very stern. So they wouldn't buy anything. Big voices came, but Plácido Domingo still loves the place. But he says it's the most difficult house that I know.
Wow. So, moving on, you said that while growing up you didn't learn much about Argentine and Latin American, classical music. I mean, we were talking about opera, but also just instrumental music. And you mentioned that the piano pieces of Ginastera that you had played didn't particularly interest you.
Yeah.
When did you start to learn about the extent of the repertoire and discover other Latin American composers that you like Revoltas?
Oh, well, for instance, that's a good one. Revueltas, I heard only a radio broadcast, and I felt like flying for the next hour. But no, that was approximately when I was 19 or 20. No scores at all. I did tell you that since I wasn't able to buy any scores, and it was unthinkable of buying because there was no money and no.
Right.
I used to make copies, and then I bound the
That's
copies
right.
as if they
Yes.
were books. I still have them. For instance, Villalobos, we knew because guitar players play him. His, known preludes and everything. I read some music that we had in the library, but not much of the symphonies were not known. By the way, I heard 3 days ago, I heard a performance of a phenomenal, crazy symphony, very Ivesian. The 4th Symphony
Huh.
by the Frankfurt Orchestra. Jesus Christ, it was unbelievable. It was in the radio. So, the guy has a lot of weird things. I mean, he composed more than 1,000 pieces, so even, the quality is, maybe it's not even, whatever, but sometimes he gives you like big bomb in your head. So most of the repertoire I did not know, and I learned through Gandini by listening to his playing when he was bringing some weird music that we never heard of. It was pretty much shut off the country then, and also the possibilities were very reduced if you didn't live in Buenos Aires, didn't have access to Teatro Colón, essentially live in a village doesn't give you any idea of what people are doing. I can give you an example. I learned first the names and then the music. I don't know if I told you that I learned a lot about music by Maclis.
Right, you mentioned that book, right? Yeah.
So I learned their lives, but I was trying to scratch everywhere. I want to hear the music.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Some of the more some of these other Argentine composers. There's Roberto Garcia Murillo.
Murillo.
Roberto Camaño.
Camaño.
And then there's Mario Davidovsky, and Alcides Lanza.
Lanza, yeah.
Yeah, and Antonio, not sure how to pronounce.
Tauriello. Yeah, Antonio Tauriello was a great pianist and conductor who was a very good friend of Gandini. I saw him a couple of times, and he used to. The funny thing is that he lives, but I think that he quit composition. I'm not completely sure, but he doesn't have any opus lately in the last 20 years. Very interesting figure, and he was pretty much advanced in many aspects. Lanza was another guy who, an interesting guy.
I've heard some of his electronic music, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting if you consider that this was kind of like in the historic, we are talking about the 70s. I mean, it's really old stuff now. Garcia Murillo is a part of that folkloristic kind of clack. See, the problem is when you are young in those conservatories and you have to play an Argentinian piece, it was kind of like imposed on everyone.
I see.
And it was a good idea. It was Ginastero's idea. So everyone, for instance, I can give you an example. 6 or 7 years, you have a such and such Beethoven sonata. You have to pick one to play in the last your recital. Such and such Foltenker Clavier, Bach. These Brahms, these Chopin, categories like 4 or 5. The last one was Argentinian composer. Murillo was one of those. Who else you mentioned? Camaño.
Yeah.
Well, Camaño was much more advanced, but we didn't get that. We got Murillo, we got La Sala, we got some of the first Ginastera, we got even Piazzolla was no.
Wow.
No, forget it. I mean, Piazzolla. We're not talking about any kind of avant-garde guy, no? So my relationship with those guys was minimal as opposed to the music that I was, by the program, obliged to do, and the music that interested me in my own discoveries as a young composer and avid reader. I cannot relate to that music, honestly.
Did you play any of Gandini's music at the time?
Some of it was too hard. He's still a phenomenal pianist. I saw him composing a piece that then I performed here years ago, Esará, here at MIT.
Uh-huh.
I saw him composing literally the piece in his first version of piano.
Wow.
Was the composition of some older Frescobaldi and
I
some.
was going to ask you about this that piece. So it says you conducted the premiere of that. Is that right?
Here in America,
Yeah.
the American premiere.
Yeah. Where was that?
Here at MIT.
I that was a concert that I missed.
Yeah.
Oh.
I did in that concert. I did like 4 or 5 interesting contemporary pieces. I don't remember when was it, but I have to look into the records. And it was like probably when I came back from NEC. I don't remember now, but it was an interesting piece. It's part of the 70s, the 70s in terms of the decomposition of all the stuff, but in his original way, in which a highly dissonant use of older structures, and it's quite an accomplishment. The piano version was fantastic, the first version. Then he did the orchestration.
I see. I'll have to make sure that the library gets a copy of that concert, 'cause I don't think we have the CD of that concert.
We gotta talk to Clarice to see if
Yeah.
it's in their records.
Yeah. I listened the other day to his Fantasia Impromptu.
Ah, yeah.
That's an amazing piece. That's a wild.
Where did you hear that?
On our LP record that we have here, the Louisville,
do?
the Louisville Orchestra recorded
You
that.
do have it?
Yeah. That's
That's
a
it.
wild piece.
It's a great piece.
Wow.
I didn't know that you have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I would like to listen to
Yeah.
it. Well, the Fantasia Impromptu was composed while he was my teacher. It was in the 70s, 70. I don't remember. He was telling me about that. That's an interesting piece, and it got his way here in America. It was the first piece that they performed here.
Uh-huh.
Was Lawrence Layton Smith?
Yes, right.
Larry.
Yeah.
Funny enough, then I met Larry
Yeah, at Yale.
at Yale. Weird, yeah. The world is small.
Wow. When you were studying with Gandini, did you get a sense about his view of 12-tone and serial music? And were you feeling any kind of pressure from him to kind of write in that way, even though at least this Fantasy Impromptu certainly is not a 12-tone piece?
No, it's not. It's not. It's a post-12 tone.
Yeah.
It is a post-12 tone.
But
No, he wasn't. No, I have to admit, he wasn't one of those scholastic guys who would say, you don't compose that way and you are not in my... No.
Mhm.
He was much freer than that.
Mhm.
No. It was my inner circling, going around the same subject. I mean, it's not...
Mhm.
He, at least in my view, was a very interesting force in my life. And wasn't exactly composing 12-tone music. I mean, he did some, but then he got, I think, a lot freer. Out of that necessary, calculation of numbers.
Right.
And it was necessary for him too, because to give an example, he was a great pianist, a phenomenal improviser, incredible sight reader. And I'm sure that he needed that freedom, because he is lately in the last years, I didn't appreciate some of the compositions, but I still is probably one of the biggest figures there.
Mhm.
And yeah, as a musician in general, he plays piano, conducts sometimes.
You mentioned earlier, and I had on here to talk a little bit more about Osvaldo Golijov. You mentioned, you met him you were fellow students at the La Plata Conservatory, and you've described him to me as somebody you see has great potential as a composer. How would you just assess the music that he's composed to date? I know that's a huge subject, and but over the years you've mentioned some things about him. If you don't care to talk about it, we can but be interesting to get
No.
your thoughts.
I mean, I can say some about it. Osvaldo as a person has been a very important, at certain points of my life, very important help and very important figure, even though I'm a year older than him. And we cross paths at some instances in our lives. Last one when I came back to the States in 1998. Our mutual knowledge, even though in the last years we barely talk. I mean, I talked to him a year ago somehow. Our mutual understanding and mutual knowledge maybe prevails. I mean, maybe I'm not sure if I can be objective on things that he does or he did. Funny enough, I was revising my office and I had some scores that he gave me even before the scores went famous. And I remember the process of, because I had to stay in his apartment, the process of the creation of this Passion.
Yeah.
Because when I went to his apartment, I mean, he has a kind of like a studio where he composes here in Brookline. His house is a little bit further in Newton. I remember reading and seeing and discussing with him some ideas. What I can say is the direction that he's taken is something that for me was unexpected, and I discussed that in length with with John Harbison, for instance. It's not the path that, to put it elegantly, pleases me, or is something that I don't have a philosophical empathy with, or something that I have to say that some of the ideas behind that, I saw them in written text, and that things that I discussed with him, I tend to agree. It's the realization that doesn't, to me, make it. And I feel kind of embarrassed that I'm saying this, and because it has been very difficult for me to relate to a person whom I admire and respect, and I really have to be thankful for advices and ideas, and also at some moments in which I needed help. From many points of view. I stayed in his place when I came to this country the first time. He threatened me. He said that if you are not coming, I'm gonna go there and take you from Argentina, bring you here, kicking your ass. He said. I said I wouldn't have any money to go there. I said, well, you have money for the flight? Yeah, okay, then you stay at my place. You eat my food. I don't care, but you come here. So, it's very hard for me to be hard on his creation, since I respected him always so much as a person. And there are some pieces that I really love, and some pieces that I did as European premieres. I mean, there's one called Yiddish Ruach, from a former, completely different style that you wouldn't even recognize now. Or some other piece that I was going to make an arrangement for. Yiddish Buch is called. It's a quartet.
A string quartet.
It's before the Dreams of Isaac.
Isaac de Blind.
It's before that. It was 2 or 3 years before that. and I was in some of the rehearsals, and I thought it was many fantastic things. He doesn't like it anymore. He told me that if I want to do an original, it's okay, and he does. But it's all for me now. I don't. And
And
for
you were going to do an arrangement for orchestra?
orchestra,
Yeah.
chamber orchestra.
Yeah.
I would like to do it, but I don't have much time now, and I prefer to devote some time in my own compositions.
Yeah.
The subject has a lot of this theme, this issue. I could talk about it for hours and hours and hours because it involves my personal beliefs on what the direction of music could be, should be, would be, maybe in the future. What his particular approach that I know very well because of our conversations and because of the same origins, the kind of like, to some extent, he from the Jewish community, me from the Italian community, we cross paths even there, and then it's later here, but I hesitate to keep talking about it because at least I have to say a very positive thing that his latest developments created in me, 1 million questions. Essentially because I know the philosophy behind, and I repeat that I trying to be, if one can be objective, if one can be in music objective, I have to admit that the direction he has taken is a certain direction that, in my view, doesn't accomplish his spoken goals.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you some of those underlying ideas you kind of share in common. What are some of those ideas?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure about a couple of things, but I don't know if the result of the creation is such that
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult for me to organize a mental process by which I can do what you do, XY function. This is the statement, this is the result.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the statement, but I don't see the relationship with the result. For instance, he was always concerned with this detachment from the music from people talking about big crowds or something.
Mm-hmm.
He was always concerned with popular materials being reused or reworked. But see, I do agree with that, but in the more Ivesian or Bartokian way. That life that some of these guys gave to evidently popular themes,
Right.
was such an important element in their creations, and such an important, the realizations were such incredible things. And come on, Stravinsky.
Yeah.
We are talking about big figures. The way Osvaldo defined. I'm gonna use the past. His process of searching for materials or using them is one thing that you could agree if you see that along the lines of these people that I'm mentioning to you.
Right.
Mahler did it.
Right.
And what are the results? Well, in that, I have those ideas in common. I have also the ideas that, for instance, this is my personal feeling, my own convictions on the 12-tone row and its consequences destroyed my musical composition. Thus, I'm reluctant to accept the importance of such a system from the actual point of view, I mean, current point of view, and obviously, historically, I acknowledge, this guy is genius in defining things, in constructing systems, but I'm not willing to say, as in the 60s or 70s, that this is the solution of the world.
Yeah.
No. I follow that creed like in a very pious believer of the church,
Right. Yeah.
and that killed me.
Yeah.
Therefore, I share that with Osvaldo, and I share his worries, and I saw how because the funny thing is, until I composed, Osvaldo and I had similar voices and directions towards some goals. Very similar, too similar perhaps. That's why it gets in the point where it gets complicated for me to discuss about it. Because I don't want to reflect on a past ghost of me, or maybe a present double split personality. It was as funny as people would see us as similar look in La Plata or here in so it is funny to relate to the subject. Osvaldo being such a very well-known composer nowadays, declared as such an important figure, and in one sense I have to say to you also openly, I'm very happy for him, but my schizophrenic personality will never deny the fact that the realization of his strategies is not what I would hope for, or to put it more elegantly, it's not something that I can relate to.
I think you've been real fair. I know you said it's hard to talk about.
It's very hard for me.
Objective, but I think you've been real good with that. I want to pick up later on some stuff you were talking about related to this, about using vernacular music in art music, and I want to pick up that when we get talking more about Charles Ives. Want to talk a bit about your education at Yale University. You received a Master of Musical Arts degree from Yale University in 1990. Was that in orchestral conducting as well? Okay. And then you received the Doctor of Musical Arts degree in 1997. When I ask you about the teacher that you studied with, if I can pronounce his name correctly, Elizar de Carvalho.
Yeah, Carvalho, yeah.
He was a Brazilian conductor and composer who died in 1996. And I read that he had been conductor of the Brazilian Symphony Orchestra, the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and this orchestra in Sao Paulo called Orquestra Sinfônica
Estadual.
Yeah. Did you know him prior to coming to Yale?
Never.
But was he one of the reasons that you...
No.
No. That's very interesting. So it was a real... What brought you to Yale?
It's a very funny story. Put it in the simple words. I was playing in this orchestra, this chamber orchestra in Argentina.
The name of the orchestra was?
Harpsichord. I was playing harpsichord in the Orquesta de Cámara, the chamber orchestra of La Plata.
Okay.
It was then, if not the best orchestra, the second orchestra in the country. The other one being the Camerata Bariloche. It's a known chamber orchestra, strings orchestra. I was playing harpsichord. The first cello, the guy who played continuo with me, was a Brazilian guy. The guy came from Brazil and he wanted to emigrate to Argentina, and then he took the position. He won the position, and he played there. And at some point, people knew, my friends and the orchestra, being one of the youngest. If no, I was the youngest. They knew that I wanted to be a conductor, and they knew that I was conducting choirs, and they knew that I was playing piano with everyone. They, and my goal would be. So the guy told me once, if I wanted to apply to Yale, and I said, Yale, I heard about but well, I studied at Yale, he said to me. I see, I think it's a big university. Well, but I can write your recommendation. I said, well, he offered that, he volunteered for that. I said, I was surprised. It was after a concert, I played the Fifth Brandenburg or something, So he volunteered for it. I said, well, okay. I said, well, I don't know, thought about it for months, and then finally, I got the information. And I saw that they needed, recommenders, and they said that, recommenders if they are from Yale. So I asked him. I said, look, I want to send my papers. I was 25 already. Would you do it? Yeah, of course I will do it. And then he sent a separate envelope. I never saw the recommendation. But the guy hadn't seen me conducting. I said to him, you saw, look, you're a musician. You can, I don't need to see you conducting. You play all these instruments, and I do music with you. You play a soloist. I'm sure that you're gonna be a great conductor. Was funny. Then they sent the thing, and then I was accepted for the audition. So I went to the audition, and the guy was actually teaching. There was Otto Werner Müller, the guy that is in Curtis now. But he was leaving Yale. When I arrived there, was my first examination. I came straight from Philadelphia, from Osvaldo's house. When Osvaldo was studying with George Crumb, we were, in our 20s then. It's 20 years ago. So Osvaldo was a student at Phil, and I came from Argentina. I stayed in his place, took the train, came to Yale, and there was no Carvalho. No. There was no Otto Werner Müller. There was a young guy taking the examinations, and the school didn't know what they were going to do next, as it happens in many aspects in many places in America. So they didn't know what to do. They didn't know who was going to be the teacher. I did exam anyway, because for me it was, getting out of that nightmare in Argentina, and I wanted to study conducting in a formalized way. My former teacher, the Carlos Kleiber's teacher, had died a year before. I was in the same theater I am now, but now I'm the music director. Then I was a poor pianist banned by some mafias out of one or two jobs because of I wasn't politically correct and because of my skills. There was, as the usual shit in all opera theaters. And I wanted to take the opportunity, so I went to do the exam. There were 300 people, they covered to 30 when I was there, and I won. And my English was terrible. This young guy told me he was convinced that he was going to be the teacher. He was assistant to Otto Werner Müller. And he said to me that I was the best, but I had to improve my English. I didn't have any clue. Honestly, I thought, okay, I go to the dictation, they throw a cat in the piano, I will write every note, I don't care. They will have to accept me because I have good ears and because I conduct. And I studied like crazy these pieces, and I conducted them, and they took me for some reason, but I had no experience. I had to conduct some passages of the Rite of Spring. I had never in my life conducted Rite of Spring. I was in front of an orchestra like two times before I came here, because I was a violin player, and didn't have any clue. I knew how to beat, obviously, because I was a choir conductor, and I heard everything because I had perfect pitch, but formal any training, nothing. Only my teacher's private lessons before he died. So I was accepted, and I didn't know who was Carvalho, and no one knew who was Carvalho. Months into coming back, I left this country in February. I had to come back in September. By July or August, Carvalho was contacted. He went to Yale. I arrived, and I met the guy, and I was this weird student who he didn't accept. And this was this weird guy whom I didn't know. Besides, after being accepted at Yale, just in case I foresaw, this is going to be a disaster, I don't know who the teacher is. I said, let me go to Curtis. I applied to Curtis. I was accepted. in Curtis was Otto Werner Müller, the same teacher I had seen a week earlier at Yale, who didn't want to take the examination because he was leaving himself the university. So he was in Curtis. So I went to Curtis, and what was the big thing about Curtis? Well, everyone talked about this guy highly, very highly, Otto Werner Müller. Everyone said that he was a great teacher. Second, Curtis had a free ride. I didn't need any money. If I was accepted, I didn't have to pay tuition, you know, it was for free. Third, I was in the age limit, you know, older than 26, you cannot even apply. Fourth, my father a truck driver, and me coming from a third world country, I didn't have any fucking penny.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be accepted at Curtis, and I did the examination. And I was the best in the written, I was the best in the oral. I went to the semifinals, and we were kind of like 5 or 6, and the guy took for the finals 2 or 3. He didn't take me. I was very upset because I saw the others and I thought, I'm bad, but these guys are not better than me. And I was really upset, and when I finished the semifinals, I was walking around and I talked to Osvaldo, who was waiting for me in Philadelphia. You know, he said, go and talk to him. I said, what the fuck? I mean, I don't want to talk to this idiot. I mean, believe me, I'm bad. You know that I'm very autocritical, but these guys are not. They don't exist. I said, you have to go talk to him. I said, I don't feel, you should. Well, I'm going to be around if the guy wants to talk to me. Otto Werner Müller himself saw me talking on the phone and called me. Could you please come here? I said, this is German guy. I said, you were the best. And I was looking at him like I wanted to kill him. I said, what? You were the best. Then why? I didn't have, not even the simplest skills in English to articulate a smart or intelligent answer to such a complete out of place comment at that moment. And the guy didn't even fucking know that I was coming from a poor country, the poor family, and that was my chance. And I said, why I didn't finish it? I didn't want to even know how to present the question. Why didn't you choose me? I mean, that was simple. If I was the best, and he read that in my eyes, and with his very thick German accent, he said, I learned that you are accepted in Yale. In Yale, you will have my very good student as a teacher, the guy that took the examination. Maybe after a year you can come here or at Yale. In the meantime, you have to prepare yourself with your English, but you were the best. I was so, you have no idea, one of those big upsets, like, when I was 15 and that exam, couldn't believe. I mean, the guy was saying that I was going to have this youngster teaching me. Actually, then I learned that the guy that was going to teach me is a good conductor and had made an okay career and had conducted last year here in Boston in the Union Conservatory.
What was his name?
Alastair Neal.
Uh-huh.
He was the assistant to the San Francisco Symphony for many years. He's my age. But then thinking, when I was younger, thinking that I was 25 or 26, and if some 26 years old is going to teach me at Yale, I thought that people were crazy. Then I was reading about Yale, trying to learn English, and said, Jesus, Yale University, this is big. When I arrived to the place and I saw these buildings, I saw the history, I said, I will never make it. I cannot make it here, come on. People have to be 1,000,000 times better than me. Well, I did make it, but then Carvalho was called to Brazil, and then I learned that Carvalho was this big Kusevitzky student, this Bernstein fellow, this Juilliard teacher, this Boston, Chicago Symphony conductor. You have time?
No, I'm just making sure that the tape recorder is still going. So
yeah. And then I learned that this Brazilian guy, was going to be my teacher. I lost the bet in Curtis because I didn't went to the final. The guy said to me that I was such and such and such. I was incredibly upset. So okay, I applied to 3 schools. Northwestern University in Chicago. I wasn't accepted there because of they had only doctorate. I didn't have the level to go to a doctorate. So accepted in 2, passed in 1, came to Yale. How? No clue. I didn't have any money. I applied to scholarships, and a week before I left Argentina, I had 1 scholarship to cover the half part of my tuition. So essentially, I went there, didn't know how to eat. No, how I was going to eat, how I was going to pay for anything, and just came, with 2 packages and tried to survive.
Whoa, that's quite a story. So with Carvalho, how do you pronounce his name?
Carvalho.
Carvalho.
The LH, it translates into LIO in
okay.
Portuguese.
Okay. You've described him as a mentor to you, not just as a teacher. I know it's a big subject, and in the next interview I want to talk to you more about conducting. But can you tell me some of the important things you learned from him?
Many, way too many. I have to admit it, and I said that even to him. I wasn't sure about his teaching. I didn't understand his style. Way into the first 2 or 3 months, I even tried to communicate with this Otto Warembier and Juilliard because I wasn't sure I was going to continue. I have to admit it. I didn't. His style was I didn't understand the relationship. But then it grew and grew into something that he then, his own family defined that I was his musical son in the last years. It was, and he always presented me. I mean, that's why when he died, when he was really terminally ill, they called me to replace him in Brazil. Traditions, first and foremost. The link, Kusevitsky, Nikisch, Tchaikovsky even, the link to Mahler, the link to all things that he explained about his studies at Tanglewood. A certain very respectful, constant sacrifice or work for learning. Some phenomenal things that I'm still trying to understand, and only in the last few years I could apply myself. I mean, the way he did conduct was old-fashioned, and the old-fashioned meaning that nowadays you get so many performances in which time is a repetition of a clock or the metronome guided, and he knew how to create, to stretch time, to stretch music, to stretch tempi, to underline things, to not to make it judicious in the worst meaning of the word judicious, not the positive part, the negative one,
Right.
The ludicrous emptiness, to put it in a funny English. Not to do that. I mean, that's mainly his, the main teaching to me from the artistic point of view. Then the bound was big. I mean, at certain point, already my second year, he would sit with me for hours alone discussing a score. Hours. Obviously, I insisted like crazy when I was convinced that the guy was what he actually was and that I would understand. I always insisted for more lessons, for more hours, for more. And while the guy was there in New Haven, he didn't care to spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about pieces and talking about this particular detail, this particular thing, this particular. And it was for me revelatory.
So some of those details you were talking about, were they strictly, were they more issues with the score, or did it have to do with actual performance issues? And probably both. But tell me about some of the kinds of details you would get into with him.
I can give you an example. Well, I can give you many. And this is really actually to this week. This week, my assistant at MIT is conducting the rehearsal because he's conducting the concert in December.
Oh yes.
Alexei.
Yeah.
Alexei chose Tchaikovsky Fourth. Tchaikovsky is a composer that I didn't conduct much, honestly. Nor I feel related to many things. There's one piece that I loved when I was a child, one piece, Romeo and Juliet. The symphonies practically I learned with Carvalho, and I conducted them for him there at Yale. And this is one piece of information, like my studies, with the Mahler Fifth or this Rite of Spring, and those very different pieces. Tchaikovsky, for instance, we were studying Tchaikovsky, and he loved Tchaikovsky Carvalho, and he said, "Look, remember this. I studied this with Kusevitsky, who studied them with Nikisch, who consulted Tchaikovsky himself. That's our link. Now you are receiving this from me." He always said with this grandeur, kind of like presumptuousness.
Yeah.
But I loved it. Now after years, I didn't give the importance to that, but I wrote a lot of comments. This is written like that, but Kusevitsky did da because Nikisch told him, and really Tchaikovsky approved it. Many things that nowadays you don't hear. You hear nowadays a performance. As I said, I did a rehearsal for the first part of a rehearsal for Alexei when he wasn't here, even though I wasn't conducting, and I was reading to the MIT students the comments that Tchaikovsky himself had written in the manuscript that Nikisch took them, and Nikisch gave to Kusevitsky, who gave them to Carvalho, who gave them to me in New Haven. That small anecdote is part of what real history is.
That's right.
In the most sublime.
Right.
Let's say that Stravinsky, people might not be right in terms of that the traditions are a bad example or bad ways of, performing. No. They're traditions. Maybe they're ideas that you can retake, rethink, and Rite of Spring. He showed me the score 104 times. The 105th time I played in the orchestra for him in the viola section. I was the 6th viola, struggling with all these rhythms. Myself with I'm the same guy who played for him at Yale. My first big hit was playing the solo part of Petrushka.
Wow.
So, with piano I had no problem, but with playing the viola in an American college, professional school, it was hard for me. I had to practice like crazy. But we went, bar by bar. He said, "No, look, I conducted this," and Stravinsky was present at Tanglewood. So I consulted with him these things. I like this and this and this and that. And I went and I talked to him, That's another example. Mahler, through Erich Kleiber. When Erich Kleiber was not that old, he, in his way to Buenos Aires, he would pass through Rio de Janeiro, where my teacher was the tuba player.
Yes.
The tuba player, he picked that instrument, he said to me, because he wanted to put the instrument aside, play the big pieces.
No, that's Gandini, right?
No.
No. Forgot who.
Carvalho.
Yes, right. No, but the tuba, your teacher, the tuba player.
No,
That's
my teacher was a tuba player.
that's right. I was forgetting who. I remember reading. Okay, it was him that was a tuba player. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right.
So he would play the music for the tuba in the orchestra, and then he put the tuba and he get the score and study how a conductor conducts a piece without a tuba. Then he went there and talked to the conductor and said, well, how do you do this? How do you? That way he got to know Erich Kleiber. And those things that Kleiber passed to him, he passed to me. I think that that's the most important, one of the two most important things in education. One is to give, give people the history, your own history and someone else's, this kind of knowledge. But essentially and as he said to me, the Greeks used to say it, I'm not telling you that. You don't have to imitate me. The best thing I can do for you is that I have to show you how to find yourself, how to find your own way. That's my function. And one thing that I saw through the years is that Otto Werner Müller, as opposed to Carvalho, every time that I see a conductor who studied with him, conducts exactly the same way, in the gesture, the same approach. And look, Carvalho taught Zubin Mehta,
Oh my.
Claudio Abbado. Abbado, Zubin Mehta,
Yeah, they're very different.
nothing to do. I mean, absolutely nothing. He taught some a tango with Osawa when Osawa was young. I mean, he had very different students. Many of them are great conductors, and they are now old. And we were supposed to be the last generation of his students, before he died. But he always would make emphasis on that, you don't have to, you don't have to even think. I mean, I'm helping you to find yourself, to find you, inside you. And those two things were very important to me, extremely important.
Did he nurture your interest in contemporary and modern music?
No, I was already completely convinced. We share the same interest.
Yeah.
For instance, he said, okay, I know your personality now. You do the Kammersymphonie, Opus 9. That was my first exam. The second exam I chose Berg. The third exam I chose the Passacaglia, Opus 1, the Webern. He loved Ives. I was his assistant for a performance there. He loved Ives Forth, and I did some rehearsal for him. And for instance, he did Joe Venetian, the piece by Lutoslavsky.
Oh yes, right.
And I loved it so much that I said, I want to do it in the rehearsal. So in that way, it's not that he nurtured that, but we share the same. We were in the same boat, essentially. In San Luis,
that's somewhat rare in the conducting world, so you're very fortunate.
Well, he did that in San Luis in the few years that he was there. He was he had so many battles because people didn't like that he would perform Berio when Berio was unknown. In the 60s, he became the San Luis conductor, and he would perform. The second Venice School wasn't known in San Luis. Absolutely, he was the first guy. So, in that regard, he did much more for contemporary music than many conductors nowadays, and he already died 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And here was resisted. He loved his Strauss. Given, it's a given. He loved Mahler. It's a given. He loved Sam Puccini, yeah.
but he did in every single concert an American or a new piece. Pieces that were not even, I mean, when he showed me the programs, and gee, you would, I mean, if you see, you have to, maybe you have to look into that in St. Louis when he was the conductor, and he told me, you know, he had many meetings with the board and with the executive director because people were refusing to play that music because it was atonal, because it's not pleasing the ears or whatever. And he said to me, my function as a conductor is I'm an educator, and I have to bring the new music. If not, who is going to happen? People, when I die, who is going to play this music?
Yeah.
What do they think that we should be doing? The end version. The piece that he loved the most, he always said that clearly. The piece that he would conduct until he died was Beethoven Fifth. As cliche as it sounds, he always said that clearly, and he loved Tchaikovsky. But he said, our function is to present new music every single concert. The monuments, yes, I love them. But there were not many guys with that mentality. I mean, I happened to be with the two biggest, say, influences in my formative years and my young professional years. Now, being 45 and people still think that I'm young as a conductor, was Carvalho with that mentality, and Dennis Russell Davies. Dennis is the guy that had performed like 5,000 new pieces, I think, or 4,000 something. I mean, the guy is crazy, but he's the only decent human being in this profession that does his job really, and he's serious, and he's clear, and I mean, those are guys that maybe are, Carvalho didn't, I mean, he conducted, big orchestras too, but he was never, big director, music director of one of them. But in the history, they will prevail.
Yeah. Otherwise, the orchestra is just going to be a dinosaur, and it'll die.
That's probably one other aspect. I mean, I also was foreseeing that 10, 20 years ago. That's probably the truth. Also, we have to renovate the orchestra. Maybe we have to we have to do changes. We have to, it's our obligation. But that's the example, not the people that will play for the end time the same symphony.
Yeah.
And they don't even have to educate kids, but they do have to educate audiences. Even if you accept, look, I mean, I'm getting, maybe the older that I get, I think, I like to do the monument, once per concert, but be one on one. If you have the orchestra, do a monument and do a complete new piece, constantly. Try to.
Yeah.
That's what the guy did, and as I said, I was already convinced. I mean, I didn't need anyone to nurture that interest, but yes, I have to admit that the two guys that I had a real relationship with, the two guys had that mentality.
Now at Yale, you also were the associate conductor of the Yale Contemporary Ensemble and worked with Jacob Druckmann.
Jacob, yeah.
How was your working relationship with Druckmann? Was he a mentor at all?
Yeah, it was great. He was he saw me from the start. I mean, he knew. I mean, he asked because he knew Carvalho, and Carvalho knew that I had my interest, and said, "Well, they are looking for someone who can read pieces." And said, "Any piece, anywhere, new music, yes." So I went to the first rehearsals, and he saw me conducting, and he was impressed, and he wrote all these glamorous reviews of my work and was my recommender, in those years. And it was funny because Jacob, as much as he was a great musician, his conducting skills were a little bit limited. So he would call me sometimes, rehearsal on Monday, 10 o'clock or 11. Call me Friday, 9 p.m. Said, "Dante, I need you to conduct tomorrow. I'm leaving town. I mean, he was always. It was always. It was funny because sometimes I was talking to some friends. Yeah, he was even telling me because he couldn't conduct the piece. I said, well, I don't care. I have to learn. I have to learn. So many times I prepare difficult pieces for his own concerts, and he would come back and do. It was very nice, and I have no regrets about having done this work. Like sometimes crazy. I had to really, literally learn pieces during my sleep time.
Wow.
But it was such a great school because even though I always loved that kind of activity, I didn't have the possibility in Argentina. I never would play new music.
Yeah.
I did some new music in Argentina. I offered myself to composers, and they took, because essentially I was the only idiot who would do that. You know, no one would do it, and I loved it. And then now I had this, 1987, I had this organized way of doing it. It's like fantastic, new composers, new music. I mean, I'll do it, anything. Just give me the. And we share many comments on the music that we were doing. And
What were some of the highlights that you need to go?
no, I don't. But I'm wondering about you.
I'm fine. I just want to make sure that it's a 2-hour
Oh.
tape. So.
Wait, yes, someone is waiting for me after 1.
Oh.
The president of the orchestra.
Oh, okay. So it looks like we need to tie it up.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, she's waiting for me.
Okay. So we'll pick up next time a little bit more about Jacob Druckmann, some other Yale stuff, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
we want to talk about Ives. And there's a whole bunch of issues about contemporary musical aesthetics.
Mhm.
So that we'll reschedule another interview. And if,
Great.
all right.
Yale is very interesting. You will see. I will tell you some stories. Yale is very interesting in many things. Great, thanks.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Sorry for this, but I had to leave.